Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Forester's Forecast. My guest today is Dr. Sheng-I Yang. Dr. Yang is an assistant professor of forest biometrics at the University of Tennessee and is the host of this year's joint Southern Mensurationist and Northeastern Mensurationist Conference. Dr. Yang is also a personal friend of mine. We both studied together under Dr. Harold Burkhardt at Virginia Tech. We had a wonderful conversation beginning with his life in Taiwan and how he came to Virginia to study under Dr. Burkhardt and then his eventual career path into the University of Tennessee. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I did. Please help me welcome Dr. Sheng-I Yang. Hey, Sheng-I, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks for inviting me to the podcast, Mickey. Glad to be here.
It's really exciting, and I have to tell you, I'm really a big fan of yours. I enjoy all of the things that you've been doing. I'm really happy that you're hosting this year's joint Southern Mensurationist and Northern Mensurationist meeting. And I wanted to tell you, I brought a relic from the last one. I've got my cup here that you made at the 2018 joint meeting. So I had to do this in honor of you.
Yeah, I can't believe the last meeting was in Blacksburg in 2018, and it has been 5 years since then.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to host a meeting this year in Knoxville, although it's kind of ambitious for me because having a newborn kid,
Yeah.
and also do a meeting, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is pretty ambitious of you. We don't normally seeing like new faculty who are busy trying to get tenure hosting meetings, but I'm really happy that you did it. For one, I think you're doing great work, and I think it's good to even get your name out there farther so people know who you are and what you're doing. And I have to say, I mean, I've been looking at it. It's going to be a wonderful meeting, and lots of people are going. There's a lot of excitement about it. So you're already doing something good there.
That's really good to know. Yeah, we will host in October from the 8th to 10th.
Yeah,
in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, and for our listeners, the early bird registration deadline is coming up on September the 8th, I believe.
Yeah, the 8th, and also the abstract submission deadline as well.
I also need to submit an abstract. I really want to present something there, but I'm like you with the baby and a job and podcast as a hobby. Writing abstracts as a second hobby, kind of gets.
Well, I mean, maybe you can introduce this podcast to the audience in the meeting. I think it will be a great platform.
Yeah, I think so. I also think I'm going to have like some koozies or some pencils or something made up so that we can give them out at the meeting.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And we also have the keynote speakers and John Paul McTake and Greg Johnson. They will deliver amazing presentations about the biometrics.
Yeah.
And remote sensing.
I'm really excited about their talks. The fact that you got two retired biometricians from the kind of biggest companies in the US is really amazing. I'm really excited to hear what they have to say too. I know that in their retirement, they might have a little bit more free time and a little bit more to say that for us to enjoy. It was really a pleasure to have John Paul on the podcast, on the first podcast. He's the one that really encouraged me to do this.
Yeah, I really appreciate this platform. I think this is really good.
Yeah, I've got a lot of love from people saying they like it, and I've got some good feedback. And I just have to remind people, I'm a biometrician who gets really comfortable in his cave working with data, and I'm not like a professional interviewer. But it's been nice to get feedback and to, kind of learn a little bit about myself too and the way that I communicate.
I do appreciate it. I think that's really great.
Yeah.
I know it takes time.
Yeah. So I want to keep talking about this upcoming conference, and particularly I want to know, your side of it, because I've never hosted a conference, and many of our listeners have never hosted a conference. So, tell us: is it a lot of work? Has it been difficult? Has it been enjoyable? What are your feelings?
Yeah, I think both. I feel I enjoy hosting a meeting, and I have hosted several events before when I was in high school. So I do like to organize these kind of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it takes time to plan all details, especially like where to reserve the location and when, and communicate with different parties, and also the sponsors who can like make this event better.
Mm-hmm.
So all these details takes time to think about it and to work on this.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure you have even a much more difficult schedule coming up because you've just started teaching classes, and then you're going to have to put together abstract
Yeah.
books and organize the talks in some kind of reasonable order. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but it's good like we have a lot of people helping me,
Mhm.
not just by myself. We have student assistants, we have professionals, and faculty members from different universities, and provide feedback and provide some past experience. So that
Yeah.
really helps me to save time to
Well,
explore that by myself only.
it probably helps that in the 2018 meeting you also got to help organize
Yeah,
that.
Ralph. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. And I know a lot of people are coming to this meeting that haven't been coming, and so I'm really excited for the presentations coming up. I think it's going to be wonderful, and I think it's going to be a good time. I'm glad that we're doing these in person again.
Yeah, I think this one is the one after pandemic.
Yeah,
Actually, we have this joint meeting
yeah,
in the house. So
yeah. That's super exciting.
we also encourage students to turn in any work, even that just the preliminary results you have. But I think people in the meeting would like to know our next generation of force biometricians excellent work. So I will encourage all the students to consider turning an abstract.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And one of the things that I feel has been lost over the years, whenever I was working on my master's, it was very apparent that grad students were encouraged to submit an abstract and present results no matter where they were in their study. If it was just starting and just presenting what they were going to do, or they've got a few results they wanted to share, it was encouraged that they get out there to give a presentation and get some feedback early on.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we've done that over the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be great, as you said, all grad students go ahead and submit your abstracts regardless of where you are at. And
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a great place. And it would be awesome if these were 100% grad students presenting their work. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and we also have student presentation awards.
Yeah.
So that would be also a competition in the meeting.
Now, have you organized the Mike Stroop challenge yet?
That's a good point. Yes, we just have the challenge ready, so we will post that
Yeah.
online this week.
I've been super excited in the past years that this has been hosted, that graduate students were winning that. And that's
Yeah.
been really exciting to see.
Yeah, I think this year's topic is really interesting. It's
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We also have FIA to join us this time.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a special session for forest service. If you are working on any project improving the, for example, FIA data collection procedure or improving the FIA like volume estimate or biomass estimate, feel free to submit one to the FIA special session.
Ah, cool. That's very interesting. I know you're also personally doing a lot of work with FIA.
Yeah.
So that's great. What about FVS? Is anybody working on FVS?
I think FVS is also welcome.
Yeah.
to the FIA session as well, but we don't have any like specific session for FES
Yeah,
this
but
time.
if people are working with FES, they can present also in the FIA.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, of course.
I don't know of anybody, but it would be great to see somebody
Mm,
doing something with it after all of these years.
I agree. FES will be an important tool.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be an important tool, and we need to see more effort there in improving
Mhm.
that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add about the conference?
Just register and come to the
Yeah,
meeting.
awesome. Exactly. We'll be happy to see everybody there.
Mhm.
I'm coming. I'm bringing a crew from Mobile, from Larson and McGowan, and we're really excited about it. Of
Looking
course,
forward to seeing you.
of course, for me, this is the conference of the year, so I love it getting to see all of the old pals and meet new ones. It's always been great, and it's always at these conferences where I personally got to know people like John Paul McTague,
Yeah,
Mike Strube, and all of these guys. Yeah,
yeah, not just on the paper, but you can actually see the
yeah,
authors.
right. And
Oh,
they're
the
maybe a little bit intimidating for grad students to go up and say hello, but once you talk meet them. They're just such wonderful people. Uh,
yeah.
and I really actually enjoy our biometrics community in the
Mhm,
US and even across the world that I feel we're very open to collaboration.
mhm.
Mostly people are nice. It's not as competitive as other fields. And for me, that's great because that's what that
I agree.
collaboration helps to push the science forward.
And I would say also the senior biometrician was willing to share and provide feedback on the junior biometrician. So I
Yeah,
think that's really great part of our community.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, that's excellent. Well, of course, this is the Forester's Forecast. I am always curious about why people do what they do. So, you're from Taiwan. You
Yeah.
went to National Taiwan University to study forestry. What what was your early life, and what got you interested in forestry?
Yeah, that's a good point, good question. And I entered forestry as a college student, but before that, I'm a big fan of biology. I'm pretty good at biology when I was in high school. So when I decided what I like to do in my career, I want to do something related to biology. And so they give me two pathways. One is to go to like medical school, be a doctor or doing something in medical school and medical related. And another pathway is to go to agriculture. Um, I have worked in a genetic lab before when I was in high school, and it's not quite like I'm not a big fan of staying indoor all the time and working in lab. So that make me like go away from that pathway, go to the medical school. So I would like to do something in agriculture. And there are several departments in agriculture like entomology, plant science, and animal science. But personally, I like trees a lot. So that's one of the main reasons why I like to study forestry. And also, in my perspective, like think forestry have a good like job opportunities after I finish college. So that's another reason why I chose forestry as my major.
Well, I spent a couple weeks in Taiwan, and so I've got to tour, some of the country, and uh, it's my understanding that you have very little or no industrial forestry at all, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So,
Lots of forests are like natural forests, and the
mhm,
conservation is the main goal
yeah.
to those forests.
So, people that go to forestry school in Taiwan and stay in the
Mm-hmm.
country to work will be more like conservation foresters.
Mm-hmm. Most likely.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, we still have some like operation no forest, but it's not like here in the U.S. Most of the forests in Taiwan are public land, on public lands, not on the private lands. So the forest management will be directed by the governmental agency, like the Forest Service in Taiwan.
And so the majority of the wood products that you use for building are all imported.
Well, yeah, most of the products.
Yeah.
Outside the country.
Yeah. Well,
but because of like a history, we Japanese have been to Taiwan before and plant a lot of forests in the mountain. The Japanese cedars, they are actually the original purpose of like planting those trees were for the timber production.
Yeah. Cool.
And the forests are still there. So there's just a small amount of woods being cut to make some timber.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in Taipei that you drive and it's all of these very tall buildings, right? And then right next to them would be this old like Japanese style house that's been preserved, for 100 or more years. And it was always interesting to me to see that in the middle of these big high rises and one of the most populated cities in the world.
Yeah, it's kind of mix of cultures.
Well, and I actually love the culture. I think at that time Taipei was like 24 million people. I don't know if it's more now, and it was the cleanest city I'd ever been to. There were no trash in the streets, or I mean, if you compare to going to like New York or Los Angeles, or something like there's no comparison. And then just the strategic green places placed around the city, just so people could have a nice space to go to and to be in trees and to experience that. It was awesome. I really loved it.
I really like Taipei as well. There are a lot of parks or greenways. You can have a bike and or just walk and sit there. And I feel like it's much safer than some of the big cities in the world.
Right. I also got the feeling that it was safe. I traveled around quite a bit by myself, and I don't speak any Mandarin, so I was just like pointing to the taxi driver, like go that way, go that way.
They know it.
They were fine. They were just like, all right, let's go. And yeah. Well, that's great. So what made you decide to come to the US for a graduate student program?
Yeah, so I think before I answer this question, I want to talk about why I like to work in forest biometrics.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because in the sophomore year, I start the statistics classes, and I suddenly found, whoa, this is amazing. We can use the quantitative tools to answer some questions in forestry. So that's the one I really want to do in forestry specifically. And then in the junior or senior year, I start working on like a bachelor summer project in forest biometrics. I model the forest growth and tree growth for Japanese cedar plantations in Taiwan. But unfortunately, at that time, we didn't have any forest biometricians in the department. So basically, I just learned by myself, and which is kind of lost at that time because I don't know what's the correct direction to go with, and make me want to know more about forest biometrics in a more systematic way. I think that's one of the main reasons why I like to study forest biometrics in the US. And I talked to a few professionals in Taiwan about like which school had forest biometrician, and yeah, one faculty member recommended me to look it out on Virginia Tech website, and I just go there and saw Burghart's name, and I email him and say, hey, I would like to work on a master degree in forest biometrics, and I provide him some my work before. And I didn't expect he would reply my email, but he did. So I think that's the kind of the story why I like to do forest biometrics and why I came to the US.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I think we're very happy that he replied to your email. I
I
actually,
really didn't expect that.
yeah, I sent him. I didn't expect it either. I sent him a physical letter, like I hand
Oh.
wrote a letter and sent to him, and then he emailed me back, and it was great. Yeah, um, and studying with Harold was the best, one of the best things I've ever did in my life. So I'm so happy he did reply.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, on his page, he only lists co-op as his only project, and like 35 or 30 years. And I was, wow. So this person just worked on one single project for so many years.
Right. Yeah, he didn't list a lot about what he was doing, because
Mhm.
I mean every year he had 10 different projects going.
Yeah, so I guess he just decided to add co-op there.
And I always thought it was funny because he would pull out his CV and it's a 5-ring binder. And you would tell him, "Hey, I'm working on this new thing," and he would pull out this 5-ring binder, and then he would start opening it, and it was like, "Okay, back in 1972,
Yeah.
here's the paper." Like,
Uh-huh.
it's like, "Oh man, it's not new."
Yeah. He
Yeah.
also have a folder of every student.
Hmm. Yeah. And put all of their work together, and
Print out all the emails.
I think you weren't there. You were probably came after. So on the graduate student office that was next to his suite of offices, it's all cubicles now, right? Um,
I think now it's college office or some
oh,
kind of.
is it? Okay.
Not no longer graduate student office.
So when I got there, it was filing cabinets in every wall was filing cabinets, which was his filing cabinets full of all of the things that he kept over the years. And then there were like random desks like through there, and that's where grad students could go work. And then after like my first or second year, they finally told him like, "Hey, we need
Need
more
to move.
space. Yeah, we got to move this out." And I think they stuck it in the basement somewhere. Yeah, but he definitely liked to keep things, and he knew where everything was at. Like it
Yeah,
never.
that's amazing. I
Yeah,
don't know how yeah
yeah,
how can I remember all these.
yeah. And well, that I mean, that was great that you got there to do your master's. And I think when you came, did you have a PhD in mind, or were you just planning to do a master's?
Yeah, I think working as a PhD that's also my plan, but
Okay.
still uncertain at that time
Yeah,
because I don't know if I can do it well or
yeah,
I just not that type of person doing research.
yeah. And I remember towards the end of your master's, Harold told me that he was going to offer you a PhD
Uh-huh.
position, and you didn't know what you were going to do. I think you were thinking to go to California and do statistics or something. And yeah,
Yeah, at that point I'm yeah, I was thinking about probably I can go like statistic PhD or I want to stay as an course biometrics.
mm. And what was
And also, Virginia is kind of far from Taiwan. Every time I need to jump into multiple flights to get to my home, so I have also considered if I need to move to West Coast, that closer to my family.
yeah, 5 or 6 hours closer?
Yeah, and direct flight.
Oh, you can from Los Angeles or somewhere else
Yes,
in California, you can get direct flights to Taiwan. That's great.
yeah, Seattle and San Francisco and
Oh,
multiple flights.
that's great.
Yeah,
I think when I went, I had to fly through Japan, through Tokyo.
there's also a route from Japan,
Yeah.
from Tokyo to Taipei.
Um, so, what was your deciding factor then? Why did you decide to stay with the force biometrics and not go into statistics?
Because I think I still like the application side of forest biometry. I can see my work can be useful, like in practice. I feel like in statistics, the end goal, I mean, my end goal will be to work on something like with only the numbers. Probably I'm wrong, but that's my thought at that time. I would like to see the real application of my work. And also, as I mentioned before, I do like biology, so I do want to work with something alive, like not just the not just the number. So I think that's one main reason I would like to stay. And also, it's hard to find a good advisor actually to work with, and I think that's also really important. As a PhD student, you need to have a really good advisor to work with. So
Yeah,
that's
I agree. And good advisors come in many different shapes. Um, Harold was definitely kind of a hands-off advisor. He wasn't there every week, like pushing you. He was just kind of letting you do your own thing in your own way. And he always told me that every grad student he's ever had was different, and they all have different approaches, and it all worked out. So, but when you
and
have
also
with the experience like he did, um, he was definitely able to tailor the program for each student differently.
I
Whereas
agree.
now that you're a new professor, and I wanted to talk about this in a little bit, but it might be a little bit complicated learning new people as they come in.
I totally agree, and I do like his open door policy. Like I feel like I bother him a lot, like because every time I have a question, I just knock the door and he will say yeah, and then we just come in and talk. And sometimes he's like working on something, but he will stop and talk to me. Sometimes even 5 minutes discussion can be an hour.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I had the
that
same experience.
I feel like that's really helpful, and
Mhm.
just the timely communication with the advisor, and
Yeah,
also he provide feedback really on time. Like sometimes just give him something and he will just reply within a day. That's the longest.
yeah, I always tried to give him something on Friday afternoon, thinking I would have a weekend off, and on Saturday morning I would get an email. You have edits in your mailbox.
Yeah. Yeah, he works 6 days a
Saturday
week.
morning, he was there at the office, and he didn't take appointments unless absolutely necessary. Saturday was his day to get things accomplished.
And so I think some of his strategy really helpful, not only like myself as a student, but as like an advisor, or borrow his strategies to work with the graduate students I have right now.
Yeah, I think it's again, not every approach is good for everybody. For me, I would have liked a little bit more pressure because I think that would have helped me to keep things on track because I get very distracted and I like chasing different ideas. And then, so like I'm working on my dissertation, I get another idea, and then I go off and I spend 2 weeks doing that. And then it doesn't work out. And I come back and I show him, and he's just excited to see it. But he was never like, oh, but don't chase those ideas because I think he knows maybe that that's where great things can happen sometimes
Mhm.
is, and that's why he gave the freedom. But I took an extra year to finish my because I did that a lot.
Yeah, personally, I do like his like this approach,
Hmm.
like really flexible for me.
Yeah,
I don't have any regular meeting, but yeah, it depends on different people,
right.
but all work out. So,
And you had him for the masters and the PhD, so you got to
yeah.
see him in both ways. And the masters is traditionally shorter, although some people
Mhm.
do their PhDs in 2 years. But I I think Guillermo Trincado, who's in Chile, did his like in 3 years. And I was asking him, I was like, "Wow, that's awesome." But I took 5 years, but I also did the master's in statistics. And he said, "Oh, I did that too." I was like, "Okay, all right, you're on a different level than me." But I had fun, and I met my wife in the later years, so it was worth it.
Yeah.
Um, well, so you decided to stay and do the PhD, and then you got to work with Dr. Corey Green, who at that time was just Corey.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty much you two. I know you started right when I was finishing, but it was pretty much you two together. Burkhart didn't have other students at the time, correct?
No, he didn't.
And I think he was realizing his age, and he was starting not to take on many. Um, I was actually a little bit sad because him and I were going to have a master student together, and that was going to be, it was going to start last January, and then
Oh.
of course he passed, so it didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen. But I was really excited to, you got to work with him a bit after going to Knoxville in
Yeah.
Tennessee, University of Tennessee. You
Mm-hmm.
guys got to have that kind of working relationship, and I was excited to finally have that working relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did it feel once you became a professor and then you were working with him? Did the relationship change, or was it pretty much the same?
I would say pretty much the same, and he's really supported. I mean, even I start here, he found me some projects, small project to start with, so that I can have something to work on since I start. It's hard to find external funding right away, like when I got started. But even I graduated from Virginia Tech, he still support his students.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. I know of others also that he was supportive, and he was always supportive of his students. And that was one of the things that I always admired about Harold is that whenever he got an award, he always held it up and said, "This is because of the students. This is for the students." And he
Yeah.
always gave the students the credit. Um, and there's, there's a lot of advisors that would do that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in his position might be, taking all the credit, and he didn't do that.
And also, it's surprising to me is he not just for like 1 year or like do it for a certain amount of year. He just constantly does this for the entire career because in like his retirement party, I can hear a lot of feedback from his previous students. Some of them graduated a long time ago, but I feel like his style and how he treat his students is constantly well. So
Yeah.
not just for a single period of time, but
Well, in your PhD program, you went and did an internship with AFM.
mm-hmm.
So you got a little bit of a feeling of consulting, but then you decided to stay in academia. So did you have a conscious choice, like when you finished, that you wanted to be a professor, or were you just kind of looking for anything?
Well, I will say both. I like to go to industry and also in academia. As I mentioned, I think for biometry really to me it's a applied science. So we have to know what is really needed in for its practice
Yeah.
before we can start working on something
Yeah.
in research. Otherwise, I would say the research will be like just a pure research, not really have any application value, which is not the one I would like to do.
Right.
So having some experience in this in industry really helpful for me to understand like what's the current project and what's the current problems and yeah the tools they use. So I think even if I just spent one summer in AFN, that experience really good and helpful for me. And and one of the main reasons why I like to start my career in university is just because of the visa issue.
Mm.
And there's a like the cap of a certain visa for people working in industry, but for university or nonprofit organization, there's no limit.
Okay.
So it's easier for me to get a visa if I work in university versus I work in industry. So I think that's the main driver to that decision at that point. If I if visa is not a problem, then I think I will reconsider that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I have to say you're an excellent researcher. You're a publishing powerhouse. You're putting out a lot of good work, and you always have since you started your master's. So we're, I think, on the industry side, we're very excited to have you there doing what you're doing. And one day, whenever you want to come back to industry, if you want to, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a job, no problem. There are lots of biometrics jobs out there today, and it's plenty of work to go around. So, and with
And I would also do like this co-op structure, like people working in academia can know the people from industry and have some interaction and exchange ideas. So
yeah,
I think co-op structure is I think it's a really good model.
yeah, it is. And that was one of the things that I liked about going to Virginia Tech is that Harold had the co-op, and it had such ties to the industry, and he always tried to keep those ties to the industry. And hearing you say that you enjoy the research, but you like the applied research and you want to bring it back to be applicable, that's great, because there's a lot of just purely academic research, even in forestry. And we're going, great, that's a nice paper, but it's not applicable to anything I do on a day-to-day basis. And we really need many people like you who are, Virginia Tech and UGA and Oregon State, like those universities that have strong ties to industry. Those places are great, and I wish other universities kept doing that. Try, like, if you're a new professor at a university in a very industrial forest area, like, you need to have those ties to the industry. Otherwise, what is your research going to accomplish, really?
Yeah.
It's just a publication in a journal, doesn't really do much for us.
So I think collaborate with Forest Service is also, FIA is also a good way for me to understand like national inventory and what kind of practical problems we need to resolve and to improve our quantitative tools. So I think collaborating with people from FIA also helpful for me, even there's no co-op in Tennessee, like at UT.
Yeah, definitely. And there's, people all over the US working with FIA data. So you get to join an already quite large network. The co-ops are very regional, which is still great to be a part of that. But working with FIA, you're joining, it's not a co-op, but it's a huge network of people working with those.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you decided you were going to go into academia. You went to University of Tennessee. So what is it like, because I'd never had this experience and many other people haven't. What is it like becoming a new professor with all the pressures of getting tenure and having to get funding and having to publish? Like, can you talk a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, I think I'm really fortunate. Like, when I start, I have a lot of support from the department. The department head, Don Hodges, really supported new faculty members. As sometimes I have a question, I just enter his office and ask, and he's really responsive. And also the faculty members here at UT also really supported it. We have a mentor system. Like I have two mentors, they help me to guide like what kind of research, what to do, what not to do. I think the most challenging part will be the combination of teaching and research together. Like you need to teach, also you need to do research. And research not just only publish papers, you need to find the external funding. So need to build out the network with the agencies for some possible sponsors. And I think that's the hardest part to me, because when I was a graduate student at Virginia Tech, Berkeley just support me. I don't need to worry about the funding, but now I need to find funding to support graduate students. And I think I'm also fortunate enough because the FIA headquarters is here, so I have a chance to talk to the people there, and I'm glad they appreciate my work. So can build out this collaboration network.
Yeah, that's great. And it's good you're having a nice experience getting started. I know some people can struggle a lot in the beginning, and I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a lot of work, but
yeah.
at least you're having some outlets there to help you to get started.
And it's sort of challenging also because I started in 2019, the fall, and the pandemic started in 2020. So everything changed a lot. And I also make some like online tools and teaching tools to accommodate these to students. That also a big challenge to me in the beginning of my career at UT.
Yeah, and you recently had a baby as a dad. I can 100% know that you're having all of those things that are going on at home as well, the sleepless nights and the organizing everything and then having to do your work on top
Yeah.
of that. Um, but how do you feel about going through the tenure process and all of that and becoming a new dad on top of it?
That's tough,
Yeah,
to be honest. Yeah,
yeah,
because I before the baby was born, I know it will take a lot of time, but I didn't expect. Wow, that's really a lot.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that's really a new challenge for me, like how to organize things in a more efficient way, how to use some not the whole time, but some small time slots to reply email and still taking care of baby. That really that's really a challenge.
yeah. I remember before thinking that I didn't have like any free time, that I was always working. Now after having the baby, I'm like, man, I had so much free time. Like, what did I do with all of that free time? Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I love, my kid is 3.5, and I love seeing new parents. I think it's beautiful, but it's also like commiserating a bit there in those first, years where you don't sleep, and it's just learning all of this new, information that you didn't know before, you didn't have to know before. I read all the books and I took the classes, and I was 100% not ready for what was coming. You think you
Yeah, the gap is just so huge. Like
are, right? Well, awesome. So, what percentage are you teaching and research?
I have 65% teaching and 35% research.
Okay, so it's
Mhm.
predominantly teaching. Uh,
Yeah, because I'm responsible for all the quantitative courses that require one in the program, like mensuration, the measurement and sampling, and inventory class, and I'm also teach a GIS
mm,
class.
nice.
Yeah, so,
It'll be really good for incorporating mensuration into GIS, especially as we're moving into a very remote sense type of inventories that are coming out now. I think it's great for people to have both worlds. It's really
I
good to have
totally
you teaching
agree.
the class too, because you know what.
But I'm not a GIS specialist, so I still learning when
Yeah.
I prepare for the class.
Well, I think with GIS, we're all still learning. Like, even if you're a PhD, like, I mean, it's just so much new technology coming out
Yeah.
constantly that we're always learning new stuff. And I've seen that you've written some papers with AI and machine learning, and that's just like blowing the whole world up right now. Than every field, and to see it in forestry and how much it's being used, especially in GIS and
Yeah.
sensing, like. What do you feel about bringing more of that machine learning and AI into mensuration and biometrics?
Yeah, I think I also have several conversations with Bergar and regarding these because he's like a traditional, like classic statistical analysis, like a regression, and but he's also yeah, we also talk about like how we can incorporate this machine learning algorithm into current growth and yield system, because it may not be like as good as the parametric model. Probably our end finding will be parametric model is still the best compared to this new technology. But I think we at least want to give it a try and see. And I think also, to my understanding, like when we read a machine learning paper or somebody propose a machine learning algorithm, oftentimes we only see the advantage of this algorithm. But is that's common we talk about the disadvantage about this algorithm. What's the limitation of these algorithms? Should we really incorporate that into our growth and yield, or we should keep in mind those are just one of the methods in the toolbox, not the only approach? So to me, I think machine learning is a good approach to keep in our toolbox, but it's not a method we should get rid of all our classic methods.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Another tool in the toolbox is always welcome, but we don't throw the old toolbox out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the actually in this conference room that I'm in right now, I gave the example that if I used the green books over here to fit a model, and then I tried to predict the color of the red books up there, they're going to be green every time according to the model, right? And that's the point, is that it's good for the data used for fitting the model, or I don't actually know what you say for machine learning. Is it still fitting a model? It's training a model, right?
Training, yeah.
Training a model. Yeah. And so you use the data for training the model, but as soon as you go outside of that data, it doesn't really work very well. But
Yeah, the
maybe,
extrapolation
yeah,
is really limited.
right. Whereas in our parametric models, one's based on differential equations with basic biological responses already built in, we know that generally they're going to extrapolate fine within reason, but generally they will definitely extrapolate much better than machine learning methods. But maybe the toolbox is to use the machine learning where it works best and use the parametric where it works best.
Yeah, I think, yeah, for certain scenarios, I think parametric will work well, but at the same time, for some cases, probably machine learning will be simpler and easier to be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, to me, that's a more objective way to look at the machine learning algorithm, rather than just, yeah, we should go with machine learning and get rid of all the old one we have.
Yeah. One of the interesting things to me, and then I would love to hear your comments on this, that I see in the literature is, it's hey, we did this machine learning method and we did these different things and this was the results, but nobody can check that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I don't know how it works today. If you're, at least as a reviewer, nobody's sending me the models and the data and saying, here, validate this.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's one of the issues. Like whenever I get a paper to review, I work out all of the equations, I work out the math, doing the variance. I say, if I can't do this, or if I find something wrong, then we need to go back and reevaluate it. But I can't do that with machine learning.
I agree. The portability is really limited, and I think that's one main disadvantage of the algorithms. It's hard to be verified as a reviewer.
So we see a lot in the literature now. We see more and more of these papers coming out, and I'm curious in 10 years you know how useful those papers are going to be from today, whereas we're still citing Max and Burkhardt, the
Mm-hmm.
taper equation paper, and every taper equation paper that's been published cites that basically. But a lot of these machine learning things are just they're not gonna be as relevant 5-10 years from now, because the science is going to advance, right?
I agree. Yeah, I think, to me, to identify the questions or the problem for machine learning is more important to simply just apply it. So I believe there are some like areas in forestry or in forest management we can use machine learning to be more efficient. So I think identify those areas more important than just try everything with the algorithm. That's my personal opinion. I also thinking about this lately about this AI and machine learning. I don't know it's just my own concern or just not really a make sense question. Uh, I feel like if our like system in other field have been adopted to this AI or machine learning structure, if we don't do something like this, for example, our gross yield model, if that's still classic, is that compatible to other field or other? I don't know what's the best way to phrase this. But I just feel like, for example, if everybody use Windows or Mac, but we are not get there yet, will we? I don't know how we are going to do.
Yeah, well, while everybody's still using Windows and Mac, there's a large group of people using Linux, and they're never going to do Windows or Mac unless they're just forced to. So I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I see your point, and I think,
Mhm,
yeah, we definitely are going to have to evolve. But it's back to what you said earlier. It's going to be another tool in the toolkit.
mhm,
Um, I, I kind of wonder if we're going to be able to kind of have a branch between the two, that
mhm,
you're using kind of machine learning to help train or fit parameters from a parametric equation.
mhm,
Maybe that helps you to get that equation to, instead of to be regional, to be more localized, for example. And I know for a decade, mixed models were like the next big thing,
mhm,
and that was going to be the next influx of models, because you're going to be able to what do you call that, to calibrate the parameters to local data. And then in industry, we just don't collect enough data to
mhm.
calibrate the mixed models,
Yeah,
so we're not using mixed models as much as maybe that the academics thought we would. Is it going to be the same with machine learning? It'll be
yeah.
interesting.
I don't know. I just don't know if machine learning is like a GPS, and then what we have the classic model is like a compass.
Yeah,
Are we going to like? Probably it's not a good like. It's probably machine learning is not a GPS, but I just curious if everybody use a GPS, are we going to stay? Can we still use a compass, and then are we going to still use that, or I don't know if that is a trend. Probably
that's
that.
that's a nice analogy, but guaranteed, I have in my cruiser vest a compass, because that's your
Yeah.
GPS. If you don't get your satellites, your batteries die. You better have a way to get where you're going.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not a good way to.
I think it's actually a great analogy, because it's
Mm,
still, while machine learning and AI is like the shiny new tool, and it might be something that we use a lot, we're still going to fall back on the old toolbox of parametric
mhm.
models. I think it's not going away anytime soon. Um,
Cool.
cool.
I do like this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty about this podcast, is that we
Mhm,
can, let the conversation go where it goes. And I love actually getting your insight on it, because I've been looking at some of your papers where you've been using parametric and semi-parametric methods. You've been doing taper, and that's the
mhm,
next thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm actually really fascinated with taper models, especially with new technology. So, for example, uh, cut to length harvesters, where they actually are collecting diameters up the stem. So
mhm,
actually, this is a huge data set right now that is available for people to actually fit or validate taper equations. Of course, because it's from a sensor, it has a huge amount of noise in the system. So we have to figure out things about how to get past the noise and all of that. But this influx of new data also from LiDAR, I think that's companies like TreeSwift who are collecting LiDAR on forest plots. I think it's going to be interesting to see how whenever you can have an under the canopy measurements of the stem, how is that going to affect our taper equations? Are we going to actually not use the taper equations that we have published? Are we just going to be fitting individual taper equations to individual trees? Then we don't have to worry about form class. Like I think a lot of this is new and exciting. What do you have any feeling on that about where the science is going?
I think the way you just mentioned is really a popular topic in taper modeling, like the new way to collect measurement points and how we can calibrate these taper equations to have a prediction of upper stem diameter for individual trees. I think that's my personal interest shifts from pine to hardwoods because I feel like hardwoods a lot of variation there. So that's why I keep working on taper equation, but for different species.
Right. Especially going to Knoxville, of course, just naturally move into working with more hardwood species because that's what's there. And one of the topics that's very close and dear to my heart is a paper that you have published characterizing stand and biomass tables from diameter distributions, a case study for mixed hardwood forests in eastern Tennessee. So I work a lot. I have worked a lot and am working a lot with stand table projection. And so to see you to be able to take diameter distribution models and characterize those stand and biomass tables from that was very interesting for me. I really enjoyed that paper.
Oh, I appreciate. I hope we will incorporate height. So because the biomass equation I used in that paper only based on DBH, but as I know they are publishing a new biomass equation incorporating height as well. So it will be interesting to see when we incorporate height, will that be have a different results or what will we get?
Yeah, so that was going to be one of my questions for you because you used the Jenkins equations from Jennifer Jenkins, and those are very wide species groups. It's like 8 different species groups, and it's only based on DBH, not on height. So it's 100% dependent on the data that they had for model fitting. It's whatever the average height was in those data. And so to be able to incorporate now diameter and height from the new equations that are coming out of Virginia Tech will be very exciting to see how the results are changing. We know for a fact on the state level that biomass in the stems and branches was way under predicted. And that's what the new equations are showing. So it'll be interesting to see how many of these studies that were using those old biomass equations, how the results might change.
Yeah. But I want to point out, I don't know is that just a special case or is like universal. I feel like the carbon inventory now only the DBH is measured. They don't measure tree height. So I don't know if we have this new type of equation to incorporate height in the carbon inventory or.
Well, when you say these carbon inventories don't have height, which carbon inventories are you referring to?
The carbon inventory we did at UT.
Oh, okay.
They sell carbons and they use that's the data I use for that paper, and I was told that only DBH is needed for carbon inventory because the carbon equation only based on DBH, not the height. But if we have this new suite of equations also need height, will that change the carbon? I believe it will change the carbon estimate.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, now in the carbon world, carbon projects are really set up to use FES. And so they are collecting height, but the equations in FES are the ones just based on diameter alone.
Oh, I see.
And I haven't heard of any effort to incorporate the new equations into FPS, which for me is be kind of important to see,
Yeah.
especially if some of these older carbon projects are being reevaluated and see across LinkedIn that they're being reevaluated all the time, and there's a lot of scrutiny there. Um, and I don't want to get into all that, but it would be very interesting to see how just simply the new equations, which incorporate height, will have an effect on it. I think it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, I agree.
And we also have done a couple. My company has done a couple carbon projects, and seeing you know the results, because we know, for example, the height diameter relationships in Texas are a lot different than Florida, than Virginia. So basing it all those using the same equation based on DBH alone, it's just it really doesn't make any sense. I realize that kind of like as a nation and in large regions, maybe the bias averages out, but if you're talking about very small properties, 10,000 acres or something,
Yeah.
it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I also want to point out one of my question bothered me for a long time. Like I feel like whenever we publish any models or equation, we don't really publish the data range used in this model fitting and or get the estimate coefficient. I feel like this is important in terms of the robustness of the model, because if we do some extrapolation like using machine learning, it will not give us really good results.
Right.
But when we implement any like models, I don't think, like especially we incorporate some coefficient, we don't usually have the data range.
Yeah, and that's very important. And as a reviewer, if I get a paper that doesn't have a data description, I will, recommend that that paper not be published until it's put in, because you have to understand the underlying data used to fit the models. Otherwise, that model is not applicable anywhere. I mean, because when do you know if you're extrapolating or not? And it's always important to know what the data are so that you can make an inference on the equation, right? So I'm with you. It's very important, and as a reviewer, I'm a stickler on that. So
Yeah, because sometimes we just use the published coefficients, but if we don't pay attention to the data range, then the coefficient may not be good enough.
well, and now being in consulting, I use only published equations. And it's very important for me to have published equations because I can back it up. Like, if this ever gets asked, hey, where does this come from? Look, here's the publication, here's the data, this is how it was fit, this is why the results are coming out the way they are. If I have something to point to that, it's very easy to show, a landowner or somebody, why are the results the way they are. And because a lot of times people don't understand uncertainty in predictions and why, my results, if I'm projecting a forest, why it not match what they're seeing. So uh, it's always again very important to see those published.
Cool.
I wanted to ask you, out of all of your publications, what is your favorite? What was the most fun? What was you were most proud of? Like, what was the favorite?
All those are my babies, so it's hard to pick a one, like the favorite one. But I do like carrying capacity paper. I think I'm the big fan of carrying capacity. I've been working on this topic for a while, so anything related to carrying capacity is really, I'm a big fan of that.
That's interesting because that might be my favorite paper of yours.
Oh, really?
I am also a big fan of carrying capacity. And in my dissertation, I worked on growth density relationships, and a very important component of that is the carrying capacity, because once the density approaches carrying capacity, the growth density relationships change because of you before had distance independent mortality, which is usually very light. Then you get into the distance dependent mortality, which can be very strong and stronger the closer you get to the carrying capacity. So I actually really enjoyed your paper because that was published, I think, when I was still as a grad student. I think that came out. So it was really exciting.
2017 or 18, I can remember.
Okay, then that was after. I must have seen you present somewhere because I do remember you talking about it.
Yeah, I presented that in SOMEN before.
Yeah. What was your most difficult paper?
I would say that biomass one.
Yeah.
We tried several different journals and I revised into different versions and finally get it published.
Yeah. That was one that you were like, once it was published, you were like, done with that one. I'm trying to move on to something different now.
I would say that is really a different area I never worked before, and it took me a while to understand the concept and those techniques. But I'm glad Guang Gao helped me a lot. That he's an expert in diameter distribution modeling. So
Right. And stand table projection. He is definitely the guy for diameter distributions and stand.
yeah,
Do you get to interact with Quang much?
on that paper, yes, we have occasionally meeting.
Yeah, I'm now like just a few hours from Baton Rouge, and I haven't spoke to him in years. I keep trying to get him on the phone, and he doesn't return my phone calls.
I only email him and he will
Yeah,
reply.
maybe that's the thing. I need to email
Try
him.
email next time.
After COVID, I was just very much like calling people because if you're just sitting in your home office all day for weeks and weeks, you want to interact with people.
yeah.
Well, I see that you're also on the editing board of
Mhm.
the Journal of Forestry and Forest Ecosystems.
Yeah.
How is that? I know that you've been a reviewer, but going from being a reviewer to also on the editing board.
I think finding a reviewer is really challenging.
Yeah,
That's my one sentence conclusion.
yeah,
But I do enjoy because that's from a different perspective. How to identify the reviewers, how to judge a paper, how to provide useful feedback, and how to deal with some situation like two reviewers have different opinions, how to do it. Sometimes I even also review a paper, even we have some reviewer comments.
yeah. So the reviewers are difficult on both sides of the equation. Then
Yeah, so
I have to admit that I've been quite difficult at times, but always to try to help, make it better. And that's the point, is just to have, quality science. And that's where I look at it from my perspective as a reviewer, is just to help have a quality science publication. And if I can help, if it's grad students, but sometimes they just don't want to put in the work. And it's like, okay, I
yeah,
to be difficult now because we don't want to just publish something to publish it. We want to have quality science.
I agree. To other have some contribution to the community, not just a number.
Yeah, unfortunately, you guys have to publish and publish and publish to get tenure. And sometimes that just means putting out whatever that you can put together just to have a publication. You're fortunate that you're having students and you're having funding, but not everybody gets to be in that place starting out, and they struggle really hard. And um, yeah, sometimes.
I totally agree. I think sometimes I think Guang Gao gave me a really good advice. He say there are short-term projects and long-term projects, and as a tenure track professor, you need to have multiple short-term projects so that you can publish the work.
Mhm.
But you still need to keep in mind something like in the long term, how you can accomplish some more complicated work.
Sounds like great advice.
You just do everything you can.
Yeah, and now he's I guess close to retirement if he is going to retire, and at the end of a career, and he's still publishing. He's
Yeah.
still doing his work. It's great to see. I see his work come out, and I read it, and I'm like, man, the guy just does magic.
Yeah, still pretty active and
Yeah,
yeah, probably really new insights.
yeah. we're much like you. We're very fortunate to have Quang Cao come, from Vietnam over to the U.S. and study with Harold, and then have a successful career in Louisiana. And stand tables and diameter distributions, we contribute much of that work to him because he is the mastermind behind it. Here, anything else before we go?
No, I don't think so. I think I really enjoy this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It's been so great to see you again and to catch up. And I will see you in Knoxville in October.
Yeah, just help spread the word, and I appreciate you sharing my LinkedIn post.
Of course.
Yeah.
You and Corey, I might be y'all's biggest fan. I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and you have my support. However I can help, always just let me know.
I will. I appreciate.
Well, hang on. We're going to end this, and then I'll talk to you in a minute. All right?
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, and until next time.
Bye-bye.